today's topic. So, as you guys might notice, Preach is not here today. Reason being is because I've been feeling under the weather for the last couple of days. And so it's been hard to schedule things in with him, with his schedule in mind. So I figured that today, because I'm feeling a little bit better than I have for the last 2-3 days, I would just kind of make a video that's been on my mind for some time. And just kind of share with you guys my thoughts. Often on this channel, we talk about accountability, and we look towards other people's experiences that they have online as means to create social dialogue. But I don't think we take enough opportunities to look at our own life experiences, things that aren't documented, and recognize ways in which we have been wrong ourselves. It's very easy to look at any story that you're telling that you've been through and kind of paint yourself as the hero. But, I'm objective enough to know that I've done wrong to people. It's been part of my learning experience, part of my growing experience, but it doesn't change the fact that I hurt people. And one of the toughest things that you have to accept about relationships, especially when you don't have great mentors around to kind of help guide you and help recognize where you've been wrong, is that you're going to try things and you're going to make mistakes, and people will end up hurt by the things that you do. And so in light of always kind of preaching accountability, I thought I would tell you guys stories in which ways I myself have done wrong to others. And so I'll talk to you guys about my first relationship. Essentially, within this relationship, I cheated. And that's something I didn't want to accept for a long time, because I think when you view yourself as a decent person, you can't imagine yourself causing that much harm to someone else. But I did. The irony kind of it was like there was nothing wrong with the relationship. It was a great relationship, both from her end and from mine. And I'm not saying this through like rose tinted glasses. Like, she would remind me all the time, like this was the first time for her where she'd been in a relationship where she could communicate freely, that she could express herself and be heard and understood and not be judged negatively, where she could basically share any thought she had and know that she'd be accepted for who she was. And I took pride in that. I took pride in fostering that kind of relationship with her, because I know growing up, I never had seen relationships like that in my personal life. I never saw other people dating and facilitating that. And so just knowing that she had that, it did give me a sense of pride. Just for a little bit more context, I was 19 at the time. This was my first dating relationship experience. She was 27, so she was a little bit older than I was. You guys noticing a pattern for me? And we dated for a year and a half to 2 years. I don't know, like around that period. It was quite some time. I was in the military at the time, and I had to be stationed in her city. And then we kind of met randomly when she saw me dancing. And from there we started dating. Things were going really well. We had a good relationship by all standards. And knowing all this, some of you be wondering, like, but why did you cheat? The reason why I did was two reasons. One, I was irresponsible, selfish. And two, I was young. And I say I was young because I'd always come from a mindset that, I felt like I wanted to get laid a lot. Like, there's no other way around it. I wanted to experience new things. I wanted to do so much. I wanted to bang all the time. I wanted to do all that kind of crazy stuff. Why? Because, like I said in the previous video, I've always thought of myself as being unattractive. And so the idea that now that I'm starting to get some play, I'm going to be locked down in a relationship, I'll be honest with you guys, it just didn't appeal to me. And so knowing that, I began looking elsewhere. I began doing that behind her back. And the irresponsible and selfish part was the fact that I was doing it behind her back. There's no other way around it. And so fast forward a couple of months later, and she ends up finding out, I think, like, my computer was open and she saw some messages. And from there, it was pretty much over. She kind of called it all off immediately, which I commend her for. If anyone is thinking of breaking off a relationship after someone cheats on you that aggressively, please do what she did. She just cut all contact. And I tried reaching out to her a couple of times, but she wouldn't respond. And everything was made much worse because I think like 4 or 5 days later, after I realized why she had cut contact with me, I had been at my work offices, and my office had a lot of females. And we were all going for lunch because one of her coworkers was going to be leaving the office. So, take everyone out for work. And so I'm walking through the city with these like 5 women, right? And I remember this so vividly. It's one of those weirdest things that's like, how fucking random. I never run in. So I'm walking with these women, and she's inside a cafe with her friend talking, and they both see me and they look at me. And I remember being the biggest piece of shit in that moment, and I waved at her and I kept walking. And I knew how it looked optically. Even though I was not romantically involved with any of these women, it was like a weird metaphor for some of the sins I had committed. So I just remember, and you might wonder, like, why would you do such an asshole thing? And I remember pride. I didn't want to admit I was wrong. I didn't want to admit I was bad. And so because of that, in that moment, I doubled down. I doubled down, and I look back on it every time like, what the fuck were you thinking? And so, yeah, me and her, didn't have contact for that. And as I came to realize over the next 2 years that I was really wrong with what I did, I had reached out to her to apologize tremendously and to say how wrong I was. And she kind of intimated to me that she understands, but she didn't want anything to do with me. And I understood that. And it was definitely something. I don't regret leaving that relationship. I regret how I did it. I regret hurting her. I regret putting that kind of potential trauma on her, because she might be leaving that relationship thinking like, what's wrong with me and how am I not good enough, and not realizing like it had nothing to do with her and her behavior. This was just me not being there at that time and being irresponsible. And it's hard to convey that to someone when your actions say something else. But I had to recognize in the ways which I did wrong, and then take that into my future relationships and be responsible, which is why like now, if I don't see potential with someone, I'll just leave early, because I don't want to put myself and them through that burden. But thinking back to it, it still hurts me, because she was a tremendously good person. And there aren't enough words to kind of say just how wrong I did her in that regards. And that eats at me. Doesn't keep me up at night, but when I think back to it, it's like, man, I really did wrong, and there's no way I can fix that. So I have to just kind of leave that at that and try to be better for the future. There's no way you can change what has happened. I ended up seeing her, it was like 4 years afterwards. I was waiting for a ride so 4 years afterwards, I was waiting for a ride at a Chapters. And I was looking out the window, kind of waiting for my ride. And sure enough, I see her walk by. And I dropped everything. I ran out, went to go talk to her, because I was just so excited. And she was cordial, she was kind, but I could tell she felt uncomfortable. And me tuning into that, I recognized I needed to keep my distance. But I told her that I'm still sorry, and I'm wishing her the best. And she says she understands, she's moved on, which is good in a way. But I think about that often. And, now that I'm in a different place in my life, where I'm not dating casually, I've let go of the idea that I want to bang everything, and I want a family, children, all that stuff kind of has been very clear and concrete for me for the last year and a half. I think back to that relationship, and I'm like, I want that kind of relationship at this point in my life. So, yeah, I think when it comes to this stuff, when we're online, it's very easy to cast stones and criticize other people very aggressively, their character, not realize that people do have room for growth. People can learn. People can be better. And I'm trying. I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be. I've done things in my life where I'm done bad by people. And these are things I'll be discussing over the next couple of weeks, where I'm going to share with you guys ways in which I fucked up so that maybe you guys can learn from it and do better. Because other people ended up teaching me lessons that helped me avoid some negative situations. And if I can impart that on anyone, then I'm happy, you know. But it's hard to come forth and admit that you were the villain in any story. But many of us have been. It doesn't mean that you're a villain all the time, but you were a villain in that story. And it's important for us to acknowledge that. It's important for us to acknowledge the pain that we've caused others. Because if we don't, then we gaslight them. And that's a bad place to be. Take accountability for your stuff. I'm not saying you got to post on YouTube or Facebook, but if you're like me and you sometimes criticize other folks for some of the actions that they've taken, also be ready to criticize yourself for the actions that you've been taking, and be transparent about that. You know, show the chinks in your armor. Show the ways in which your character is fallible, you know. We may not be defined by our pasts, but our past is definitely part of our journey, and there's things that we have to acknowledge. Don't just show the good shit, you know, show the bad shit too, right? So yeah. And, you know, people ask me, like, why would anyone ever cheat? People cheat for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes people cheat because they're neglected. Sometimes people cheat because they're not ready. Sometimes people cheat because they're selfish. Sometimes people cheat because they're impulsive. Sometimes people cheat to get back at folks. Sometimes it's a combination of multiple things. Cheating is a complex thing, and it's not something we should condone or we should accept. It's something that we as a society have to speak about responsibly and understand that it hurts folks, and that commitment is not just a word, but it is a series of actions. It's a way of life. When you commit, that means you're encompassing a whole bunch of different things that you're going to do moving forward. So let's be honest about these things. I know too many of us are engaging in bad behavior or have engaged in bad behavior that we'd rather keep in the dark. And I think by keeping it in the dark, we don't allow for our society to really look at these things objectively and try to look at them more compassionately and see which ways we can allow people to tell their truth, allow for truth and reconciliation to happen, and for people to start their healing process. So this is my admission to you guys. You guys can hate it. You guys can like it. That's perfectly fine. I'm perfectly open to all kinds of criticism. I may be deserving of it. But I wanted to kind of just be candid with you guys, because if I can influence anybody in a positive way, then I'm always happy to do so. So that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys may have learned something. And if you guys want, maybe you can share stories in the comments where you guys have been the villains, and, you know, and then we could have that discussion. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today.